Virtua Racing is more than an early 3D racing game. It is a snapshot of the moment when arcade gaming was beginning to change forever. Released by Sega in 1992, Virtua Racing arrived at a time when the idea of putting a convincing, three-dimensional racing environment on an arcade screen still felt like something from the future. But Virtua Racing was not created simply to prove that Sega could make polygons move. It was designed around the arcade itself. The cabinet, the controls, the spectacle, the short competitive sessions, and most importantly, the coin that gave the player access to the experience. To understand Virtua Racing, you have to understand the environment it came from. In the early 1990s, arcades were still places where technology was part of the attraction. A new machine could be a technological demonstration as much as a game. Players walking through an arcade could see a huge cabinet, hear its sounds, watch other people playing, and immediately understand that something unusual was happening. Sega had already built a reputation for creating arcade experiences that felt different from what was possible at home, and Virtua Racing was one of the clearest examples of that philosophy. The game was developed by Sega AM2 under the direction of Yu Suzuki, one of the most important figures in Sega's arcade history. Suzuki had already worked on landmark arcade titles, but Virtua Racing represented a different kind of ambition. Instead of relying on detailed 2D artwork or sprite scaling, the game constructed its world from polygons. The result was visually primitive by modern standards, but historically important. The track, cars, landscape, and surrounding structures were represented as a coherent three-dimensional space, giving the player a sense of depth and movement that traditional arcade racers could not reproduce in quite the same way. The technology behind the game was crucial. Virtua Racing was built to take advantage of Sega's Model 1 arcade hardware, developed specifically to make real-time 3D graphics practical in an arcade environment. This was not simply a case of taking a normal racing game and adding polygons. The hardware and software were developed around the idea that 3D itself could be the selling point. Sega was effectively asking arcade players to pay for a glimpse of the future. Simplicity is not a weakness. It is one of the reasons Virtua Racing works so well as an arcade game. The player does not need to understand every mechanical detail before putting a coin into the machine. You simply accelerate, steer, brake when necessary, and try to complete the course. But beneath that accessibility is a system that rewards better lines, braking points, and control. The first race can be about survival. The next can be about improvement. Eventually, the arcade machine becomes a test of consistency. That is one of the defining characteristics of classic coin-op design. The game gives you enough information to understand what you are doing, but not necessarily enough mastery to guarantee success. The goal is to create the feeling that the next attempt could be better. In Virtua Racing, that creates a natural loop. You make a mistake, lose time, learn the track, and want another chance. The coin becomes part of the psychological structure of the game. You're not just buying another race. You are buying another opportunity to improve. The cabinet itself is therefore part of the experience. Virtua Racing was designed for an arcade environment where the physical machine could be as important as the software. The steering wheel, pedals, screen, sound system, and physical presence of the cabinet help turn a racing game into a miniature driving simulator. Even if the simulation was far from realistic by today's standards, the sensation of sitting in front of a dedicated racing machine made the experience feel special. Virtua Racing is ultimately a game about transition. It sits between the old arcade tradition of instantly understandable action and the emerging world of polygonal 3D gaming. It helped demonstrate that three-dimensional graphics could become more than a technical curiosity. They could become the foundation of an arcade experience. And perhaps that is why Virtua Racing is still worth examining. It was not simply a racing game from 1992. It was Sega showing the arcade world what the future might look like. The polygons may look primitive now, the environments may seem empty, and the physics may feel simple compared with modern racing simulations. But put those things back into their original context. The arcade floor, the dedicated cabinet, the steering wheel in your hands, the sound of the machine, the countdown before the race, and the knowledge that every attempt began with a coin. That is where Virtua Racing makes sense. It was never trying to be the biggest racing game. It was trying to be the most immediate glimpse of the future that Sega could put inside an arcade cabinet. And for a brief moment in the early 1990s, that future was made of polygons, speed, and one more coin.